Hey guys, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the Crkt G.S.D. This is a knife that got very close to being put into my EDC rotation when I first saw it, but because of some issues, which I'll go over, it did not make it in. So the Crkt G.S.D. has been around for a while, and this is a Liong Mah design. Can't remember when they actually released this. Let's see if I can get it to focus on that. I think it says, yeah, Mah design after the GSD in the bottom there. You have the IKBS logo. I think that's the model number down there. And then Crkt on the other side of the blade. So this is an overseas produced knife by Crkt. Designed by Liong Mah, who's designed a few things for Crkt in the recent years. I believe it is a interpretation of a custom that he has. I'm not sure, but I believe it is an interpretation of a custom he has. But this is an overseas produced knife, so it does not have the same materials that he would in a custom knife. So the Crkt G.S.D. is a all stainless steel handled knife with a 3.3 inch blade from AUS-8, made from AUS-8 steel. It has, I think that's a pretty flat ground. Well, maybe it's hollow ground. Very takes the fingerprints very well. Spear point blade. You have 3.3 inch blade. Very shiny blade. You have good jimping on the top of the blade. So all stainless steel handles. They almost look like titanium the way they were finished. And there is some kind of contouring here, which makes it good ergonomically. You have a stainless steel frame lock, tip up right or left hand carry, which is a plus. One thing that I was excited about this knife was a tip up right or left hand carry, so I could swap it over to the left side. You have the IKBS system, which, there you go. That's one of my criticisms right there, is that for an IKBS knife, sometimes it does not deploy very smooth, and see, that time it did it well. But as far as for IKBS knives with the ball bearings and the pivot there, a lot of the other Crkts seem to perform a lot better than this, and I'm not sure if it's just the design, but it's a little bit disappointing for it worked that time. But why did I like this knife? Well, overall it looks great. The finish on the handles, it almost looks like titanium, even though it's only stainless steel. So that's a plus. That spear point blade is really attractive, especially just the way it was finished. And for something that you would carry every day, like in a budget line, and this is a budget, I would say. This is around $63, so they're not extremely expensive. So they're not like your 150 plus knives. So it's under $100, but it's not like a $30 knife as well. D10 is good. Can't shake this out. So it's attractive, and it's also very thin, and that's why I also like this. It was very thin. So you have I think it's a plastic Zytel, hard to tell exactly what the material is. Backspacer there, but it's a very thin knife, which makes it very good to carry. Now the pocket clip's a little strange because it's a stainless steel pocket clip, but it's, you know, much thicker than most pocket clips. Because of the way it's designed, you don't have that flex because it's, you know, a very thick piece of metal. You have that gap, and that gap, you know, does work well for, you know, thicker fabrics like tactical pants or anything. But it's almost too much of a space, and even with, you know, like 5'11" type pants, it still is a little bit loose, and you can't adjust that because of the way it is. And it carries reasonably deep. You have a little bit of knife exposed, so it's not an extremely deep carry. It's not terrible, but you know, that pocket clip could be better. But I think they were trying to get something that looked, you know, more like a custom with that type of pocket clip. But it does secure well with 2 screws, and then in the back you have a lanyard hole, which is a decent sized lanyard hole. You should be able to get your 550 cord through there. But here comes another criticism, and that is the weight. And that comes in at 5.5 ounces, which, you know, you get because you have the stainless steel handles, and because there is no attempt, again, that didn't deploy very well, there's no attempt to lighten that. There's no milling out of any of the stainless steel in the handles, so that's why you get something that weighs 5.5 ounces, which some people don't think is too heavy, but with a lot of the competition, of course, you could have something that's lighter. I'll show you some comparable options there too. Now, another thing I do like is the pivot, because it's got the Torx on one end and it's just solid on the other end, so I like that. I don't like when it's Torx on both ends of the pivot. Now the flipper has a little bit of jimping, but it's also a very small flipper tab, and that's part of why sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to deploy this knife. Sometimes you'll get, well, now it won't do it. I have found over time that the more, that time it didn't lock up, so it didn't work. Sometimes it works, but you have to really give it some force to get it to open sometimes, which you shouldn't really have as much of a problem with an IKBS flipper. So the flipper tab is very small, and that's part of what I think plays into why it sometimes does not deploy as well as some of the other flippers. So overall, it's a great look, but I think that because of the weight and the price you're paying, compared to some even other CRKTs, it just doesn't almost seem like it's worth it. I mean, let's look at some other CRKTs. I mean, you have the Outrage. Well, that's not the Outrage Knockout. That'll be later. But the Outrage here, which is also on IKBS, you know, Ken Onion design. This comes in at 4.15 ounces, and I think it is, I don't remember the price, but it is cheaper than the G.S.D. Now it's going to be a little bit different. You don't have offset. I think this is a 8CR13, but you know, from a perspective of the flipper tab is still small, but it just confidently, you know, deploys every time. And it just seems like it's a lot smoother on the IKBS. So you have the Outrage, also by CRKT. Now, no huge disadvantage is the fact, for me, you can't put the clip on the left side. But also, you know, you have the Hootenanny, which is significantly cheaper as well. It's also an IKBS. Now, again, I think it's only 8CR13 MOV steel, but that one you also have very reliable flipping with the IKBS. So, as far as, you know, budget IKBS knives, CRKT is able to get reliable action on that. So that's not the issue. And I think I've seen other videos where they've talked about the G.S.D. It does not flip as well. It flips, and if if you do it right, you will get a solid deployment, but does not flip as well as some of their other knives from Crkt, which are even cheaper. Now there's also Crkt deviation, which is 5.9 ounces, which is even heavier. So this is another proof that where you have some of these knives where very attractive designs by Crkt, but very heavy because of the stainless steel handles. Now, finally, one of the reasons why it's so hard to carry this is because this exists, the Kershaw Knockout. And for a similar price, now yeah, the Crkt is around $63. You get a Knockout for around maybe $70 or so. USA made, better steel because you have that Sandvik steel, and aluminum handles, same thinness, but the Knockout is 3.8 ounces, significantly lighter. And you have, again, a swappable tip-up right or left-hand carry pocket clip, and this one buries deeper. It's that Kershaw deep carry pocket clip, and it works better because it's standard pocket clip, not like this one where it's kind of got that gap there. But comparably, let's look at these. There again. Now you have a very similar blade length. Drop point, more classic drop point on the Kershaw Knockout. About the same blade length, about the same blade width. So both of these, you have that broad blade. You don't have the jimping on the Kershaw, which is a disadvantage. But on both of them, you have that very thin handle with that plastic backspacer. And so that's why it makes it very difficult to put the G.S.D into the EDC rotation, because the Knockout exists, because something so similar in blade length, handle thickness, and functionality exists at a similar price. And their G.S.D is a little bit thinner overall if you look at that dimension. But because of that, it makes it hard to choose this over this, because the Knockout is so good that I bought it twice, that I have two versions of it, and that I carry two different versions of the Knockout. So I may probably make a video on the Knockout at some point as well, even though it's been around for a while. But yeah, so the G.S.D is it's attractive in the design, just the looks overall, and the fact that you have a designer who designs custom knives, who designed this, and the design is great, and the problem is just some of the ways it was executed. The IKBS is not tuned in as well as it should be. The weight is far too heavy for what it is, because this is a very attractive looking knife, which you could put into maybe a dress carry, but it's a little bit too big for that and a little bit too heavy for that. And as far as with the pocket clip, I like the idea that they're trying to make it look custom, but the whole thing that you had this gap, that there's no flex or anything, it just kind of is it's a little bit of a miss. As far as lockup too, there's a little bit of play side to side, just slightly. I mean, there's no up and down, but there's slight play. Overall, I'm keeping this because I like the design, and it will stay in my collection because I like the design. I think it's a very attractive looking knife, and neat to have in the collection. But as far as carry time, I don't really see it getting a lot of carry time. And I've had it for a while now. I've had it since they've released it, which I believe was over a year ago at this point. And it hasn't gotten hardly any carry time just because of those few things that they could have gotten right. And you know, they did get the lanyard hole right. Not a lanyard person on these types of knives, but look, you know, compared to the Knockout in that sense, Knockout is a very small lanyard hole that's practically unusable with a 550 cord. So they get that right, and I was excited when this came out, and I bought it and had it for a while, but it just hasn't gone into the rotation just because of those few areas where it's just lacking. And it's so easy to go to something like the Knockout just because of all the things it gets right. So that's my take on the Crkt G.S.D. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.